We are moving on to section 2 in our notes for Unit 4. And we are going to be talking about exponents. So when we see a tiny little number above something, such as 2 to the 6th power, that little power is really just saying, I am going to repeat multiplication. So it's going to say that is really 2 times itself 6 times over. And many of you probably remember this, but I want you to write this out anyways, because this is going to help us look for some patterns in how this works when we get to more complicated situations. So again, powers is all about repeated multiplication. And I might even write over here, repeated multiplication. Just so I remember that. The kinds of problems that we're going to be running into involve having multiple powers or multiple things with exponents on them, and we need to work with that. So for example, if we have x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd, I'm going to actually do this in 2 different colors here, and I would recommend, if you have the ability to do so, to do the same, because it'll help us see a pattern. So x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd. X to the 3rd is x times x times x. So x times itself 3 times over. And then we're going to multiply that by x squared, which is x times itself. So you may have seen x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd and thought, hey, that's x to the 6th. 2 times 3 is 6. But actually, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 x's, all to the 1st power, all to a power of 1, because it's just x by itself. And you add those up, and you have x to the 5th power. So when we are multiplying these bases, we are actually adding the exponents. So we might even write that down as a little note here. Multiply base, which is the main numbers, and that means add the exponents. If shortcuts are not your thing, you can write it out like this every single time and it will also work for you. So you do not need to take a shortcut. You can just write it out, x times x times x times x times x, and then see all 5 of them and count it up. So that is always an option. Continuing on, what if we have a power of a power? That's going to be an interesting case that we'll see. So let's say we have something like x to the 3rd to the 2nd power. And in this case, you would almost think, oh, well, it's 3 to the 2nd power, so it's like x to the 9th, that you'd square 3. But that's not exactly how it works. Let's take a look. So if you write this out, x to the 3rd squared means x to the 3rd times itself. X to the 3rd times x to the 3rd. And if we write that out, well, x to the 3rd is x times x times x. X to the 3rd is x times x times x. And when you combine all of that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's, x to the 6th power. So when you have a power of a power, you end up multiplying those numbers. So power of power multiply the exponents. So these will be some basic rules that you will see. Now there's also going to be some weird cases that come up, and it's not necessarily super unusual, you just have to be careful. Let's imagine something like this. If we have 3x to the 4th all to the 2nd power. When we do that, that's like saying 3x to the fourth times another 3x to the fourth. So we're going to end up taking a 3 times a 3. And as you'd expect, that's going to be 9. Then we're going to have an x to the fourth times an x to the fourth. And if you remember from what we did up in the last couple problems, whenever you have two exponents, just like we did up in this problem here, we're going to end up adding those exponents, because x to the fourth says x times 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 x. That's going to be a total of 8 x's being multiplied by each other. So 8 x's being multiplied by each other is going to be written shorthand as x to the 8th. So something like this, the 3 is really being taken to the second power. 3 squared is 9. But the 4 is just being multiplied by 2. So it's going to be a little confusing to keep all of that straight, but remember, our numbers out front are going to act a little bit differently than our exponents. The easiest way to not be confused, honestly, is just to write it out like I did here. When you see that square, that really means just times itself. If it was cubed, you would just write times another 3x to the fourth, and so you'd have it 3 times. So don't be afraid to write these out the long way, because it makes it a lot more visible and clear what you're working with. So on to some examples.